2023 class for, I think this is the 10th or 11th year. So we have lots of recipes if you want to try some other, homemade holiday gifts and treats. My name's Kim Guess. I'm a dietitian here with the Well at Work Wellness Program. Thanks for braving the weather to come join us. We can keep an eye on the weather out the back door here. And we have the door open to have a little more inflow and everything. Not fun here. So today we're making 3 recipes and they're all fairly simple and they all make great homemade holiday gifts. And some of them can be really affordable to make, and it's just nice to give a gift that's homemade. You can put some thought into it. You can make it in an eco-friendly way. So I'll try to give you some tips along the way. So the 3 recipes we're going to make are chocolate peanut butter dates. They kind of taste like a Snickers bar. And then we're going to make this chili crisp. I have a little sample here that I made a couple days ago. And then we're going to make a golden milk mix. So the idea is you can gift it in a jar, just the dry part, to somebody, and then handwrite the instructions you'll know on how to prepare it themselves. So we are going to start with the peanut butter chocolate dates. Because that requires a little bit of cooking. We have to basically melt the chocolate and stuff the dates. So we are going to use medjool dates, which are kind of like the softest, stickiest ones. They have a caramely flavor, so they make a good caramel replacement in recipes. And they're kind of just already formed, you can stuff and cover in chocolate without having to do a lot of work, and it's still delicious. So the recipe calls for 12, but you can cut this recipe in half or double it, quadruple it, whatever you want. So I have 12 that I bought these in bulk. And they're like $7 a pound. So of the 3 recipes, this one is a little more expensive than the others. I think I determined each batch will probably cost you about $8 to make, which is still not bad for a homemade treat, for a candy. So we have our 12 dates here. So something new that I learned is that dates are actually not a dried fruit. These are fresh. They look very dried. They just naturally dry. They lose like 70% of their moisture on the tree before they're harvested. So they last a long time, but they do kind of dry out over time if you keep them stored for a while. So if you make this recipe, I would buy them fresh, make sure they're nice and gooey and delicious. But you can use the older ones for recipes where you might be like chopping them up or mincing it, and you can also rehydrate them in warm water for a few minutes if they get too dry. But for this recipe, I would go with really fresh ones to make it really squishy and delicious. So these still have the pits in them, and occasionally they have a little stem on the top, so we just want to remove all of those. Sometimes you can find them already pitted, but for this recipe, I like to buy them with the pits still in, because then you can cut the date exactly how you want and you won't have the peanut butter flaking out unexpectedly. So I'm just making a little slice here. Obviously, you don't want to cut all the way through, so just kind of gently cut it. This is a little dangerous, so you can, put it down on the cutting board if you want to be a little safer. Just cut about halfway through. The pit will kind of naturally stop where, at the halfway point. And then just remove the pits, and you'll see that there's a pretty big cavity inside each one. And you can see that on Zoom. And we're just going to fill it with peanut butter. And you can fill these with other things if you'd like to. You could do almond butter, cashew butter, tahini. I've even stuffed marshmallows in there. You can get creative with it. And you also don't have to coat them in chocolate. You could skip the chocolate altogether. You could just half dip them, or you could drizzle them. I like to fully coat them because I think it seals it, and it just tastes delicious, and it's a holiday treat, so why not? Okay, and then we'll start melting the chocolate as well. And oops. Yeah, these are very fresh and squishy. They look really good. There's other types of dates. What's the other common one? I forget the name right now, but there's other types of dates that, would be fine too, but this type is personally my favorite, because they're nice and squishy. So squishy, I can't even tell where I cut it. Okay. All right, so we have all of those pitted. Yeah, I'm gonna change my gloves because they're really sticky. Okay. And we'll start the chocolate. So you can use any kind of chocolate you want, chocolate chips, chocolate chunks, milk chocolate, dark chocolate, white chocolate. But I like to use dark chocolate to prevent them from being overly sweet, because the dates are already pretty sweet. And if you need them to be vegan or dairy-free, dark chocolate is more likely to be, but you want to check the label if you specifically need it to be vegan. This one is 100% plant-based. And I like to use chocolate, like baking chocolate rather than chocolate chips, because chocolate chips can't be tempered. They have too much fat, so they are actually meant to stay gooey and not harden. So they're really great for like a chocolate chip cookie or something where you just want melted chocolate. But you don't have to temper the chocolate in this recipe, but if you do, it creates a little bit of a nicer finish where it's shinier, it doesn't melt so much in your hands, and it'll have like a little snap to it rather than being kind of chewy. So if you want to take it a step further and use like this kind of baking chocolate or chocolate chunks or like a baking bar that you chop up yourself, that chocolate works great for tempering. So I'm going to show you how to do a really simple tempering method if you want to try it out. So it's called the seeding method. So we have 3 ounces of chocolate, which you can, just buy it in a 3-ounce package, or if you have a scale, you can measure it. Or I did a little bit of cooking math earlier, so I have an 8-ounce bag, and I'm gonna make you all do some math. So what I did was I made stacks of them. I made 8 stacks and tried to even them out, so like each stack was an ounce. So I took away 5 and I left 3, so I forget how I was gonna make you do math. Maybe I won't make you do math. You're gonna relax, just relax. Okay, but what we can do right now is we want to heat up 2/3 of the chocolate and save 1/3 for later. So I'm just gonna make 2 stacks, which doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm gonna set 1/3 aside. And I'm just gonna chop it up so it melts a little faster. So the seeding method for tempering chocolate means that you add 2/3. You melt 2/3 first, and I'm going to use a double boiler. You could also do this in the microwave. It's a little bit simpler. You melt 2/3 until it's just melted, and then you turn off the heat and you add the remaining 1/3 of the chocolate, and you just use the residual heat from the chocolate to melt the rest. And the reason why this helps with tempering, again, which is just, it makes it have that nicer finish, a little snap to it. There's a different type of crystal. I think it's the beta crystals in chocolate like this. And so you're seeding those crystals in the already melted chocolate, and it helps the rest of the chocolate take on that same crystal form that gives it that nice finish. So probably more than you ever wanted to know, but if you want to get fancy for the holidays, then this is a simple method. If you've ever watched any of those baking shows, you might see them tempering chocolate where they have a marble slab and they pour the melted chocolate and they're like scooping it all over the place. That's a little more complicated, but I think that's probably how the pros do it. But I worked in a bakery and we never tempered our chocolate. So you really don't have to if you don't want to. So for a double boiler, what I did was I put about 1 inch of water in the saucepan, and it's on like medium low heat. We don't really want it boiling, so it's going to create a lot of steam, and you don't want any water in the bowl, and you also don't want steam coming out of the sides, because that's hotter than boiling water and you can burn yourself really bad, right? So I'm going to turn that down. So I melted the chocolate. You can see it's all melted in there. And you want a bowl that's bigger than the pot so that you don't have, water coming out the sides. Okay. So there's 2/3 of the chocolate. We'll add the rest in. And this is I think a stainless steel bowl, so it's gonna cool pretty quickly, but just be careful if your bowl is still hot. Like if you use a ceramic bowl, make sure you use a pot holder when you hold it. So now we've seeded the chocolate. It's gonna help the rest of it take on that nice structure. And you just have to stir it quite a bit to get the rest of the chocolate to melt. And chocolate, when it's properly tempered, is like, I think 88, 90 degrees, somewhere around there. And do you know what the average human body temperature is? Anybody remember?
98.
Yeah, like 98, 99, somewhere around there. So what you can do is, once it's cooled a little bit, you just dab a little bit on a kind of temperature sensitive part of your body, like your wrist or your lower lip, and if it feels cool to the touch, it means that it's lower than your body temperature. So it's probably about 90 degrees, maybe a little lower, but too much lower than that, it's going to be hardened. So that's kind of the sweet spot, if you want to, take it that far. So we have that ready to go. I find that when you do the seeding method, it still ideally cools for a few minutes to get it to the right temperature. And when it is properly tempered, then the chocolate will harden in just a few minutes. If you did it, really hard chocolate and you dip something in it, it might take like an hour to harden, which again is okay, but getting a little fancy here. Okay, so now we're gonna fill the dates with peanut butter. And what I did was I took a pastry bag and filled it with peanut butter because it makes it really easy. So I'm going to show you how to do this, but I'm also going to show you how to do it with just a butter knife in case you don't have a pastry or a piping bag. So you don't want to overfill them because it will ooze out the sides and get messy. And I think when the peanut butter, if there's too much on the outside, it mixes with the chocolate and makes the chocolate kind of streaky. So you don't want to fill it too much. And I usually wipe the outsides if there's chocolate or peanut butter overflowing. So it's probably like a teaspoon or so of peanut butter per date, but it really depends on the size. So if you're making a ton of these, like a quadruple batch, then it is nice to use a piping bag. You could probably also fashion one out of a Ziploc bag if you wanted to. But I usually actually just make them with a butter knife. So I find this works best compared to like a spoon or any other utensil because it's small. And so I just take a little bit, like a teaspoon or so, and just kind of place it in there. And make sure it fills the cavity and then press it closed. So you can see it really doesn't take a lot of peanut butter. So I'm going to wipe those at the end. Oops, that's too much. So this definitely can be done, but I'm going to show you. I'm going to do the rest of the piping bags. It's just a little bit easier. And then we are also going to top them with crushed peanuts, which is optional, but I think gives it a nice little crunch and gives it a nice finish on top. Okay. Let's wipe off the extra peanut butter real quick. It's not going to be perfect, but that's all right. And also, if you want to get picky with it, you can start dipping the more cleanly filled dates first and do the messier ones at the end, which will help minimize the amount of peanut butter that gets mixed in with the chocolate. But either way, not a big deal. Okay, so probably that order. All right. I also have other notes on the snack that I'm going to try to remember to tell you everything, but I like this treat because, you know, other than the chocolate, it's mostly fruit and nuts. Well, peanuts are really a legume. So it's actually a nutritious snack that has filling properties. You know, with the peanut butter, you have healthy fats and some protein and, with the dates, they're a fruit, so you have fiber, so you get the fiber protein combination that actually makes it more filling. I brought these to a soccer game and they made a nice halftime snack and people seem to approve of them, so I think they're good as a treat or just a snack. And I'm gonna dip them and then put them onto this silicone baking mat. If you don't have these, you can just use parchment paper or wax paper, so that they don't stick. The other things I want to say, dates are shelf stable for about a month or in the fridge for 6 months. So they are kind of like a dried fruit. They don't last quite as long as say raisins, but because they're mostly dried, they last a long time. They're grown in California on date palms. But they also grow in Arizona, the Middle East, Africa, especially Morocco and South Asia. And they have vitamin B6, folate, niacin, magnesium, fiber, and potassium. 4 dates has 7 grams of fiber, which is about 28% of the daily value. So, you know, most fruit has a lot of fiber, in particular fruit that's mostly dried because everything becomes more concentrated. And 12% daily value for niacin and potassium. And potassium is one of the minerals that is kind of hard to get enough of, because there's no single food that has a huge amount in there. Whereas say vitamin C, you can get a whole day's worth in like 1 orange or something. Don't quote me on that, something like that. So to get enough potassium, I think just eating a variety of fruits and vegetables and eating, you know, several servings throughout the day can help you get enough of that important nutrient that's good for your blood pressure and heart health. So what I like to do is just toss the date in here and then turn it over with a fork. Make sure it's all covered and then wipe off the bottom so you minimize the amount of cooling that goes under the date. If you didn't want to have that flat layer on the bottom, you could put them on like a wired rack, one of the ones with the squares, as opposed to the ones with the long holes that might fall through. But that will help some of the chocolate drip off, but that's just something else to clean, so I usually don't bother with that. You can also use a toothpick, but I find the fork to be easiest. I think toothpicks are maybe better for if you're gonna half dip something, because then you have a little more control, but for the fork, I think it helps to turn it over and be able to wipe the edges and keep it nice and neat. So before I get too far, I'm going to chop up some peanuts to put on top because you want to put them on while the chocolate is not melted yet. So you probably just need about 2 tablespoons of peanuts. And I like to use roasted and salted peanuts. The roasted ones are nice because they have a little crunch to them. But if you want to have less salt, you know, you can do unsalted peanut butter or unsalted peanuts, or, you know, 1 salted and 1 not. So you can also customize these to your taste.
Yeah, have you ever substituted almonds and almond butter for people who are sensitive to peanuts?
I haven't done it myself, but I think that would definitely work well. Yeah. Yeah, so the question, if you couldn't hear it, was substituting almond butter or other nut butters, which should be totally fine. There's, yeah, cashew butter, almond butter, or if somebody is sensitive to peanuts and tree nuts, then you can even do sunflower butter. So there's a few options. Okay. So I'm just gonna finish doing these real quick. And then next, I think we'll do the chili crisp next. So I'll just start talking about that. See if I can multitask. So chili crisp has become really popular lately, but it's been around for a long time. there's one brand in particular that I think was the original. It's called Lao Gan Ma. And, it is spicy and has a little crunch to it, and it's savory and a little oily, and it just makes a good topping for all kinds of things. I served it today with a little bit of roasted broccoli. So I think of it as just sort of a flavor enhancer. So I think it's good on roasted vegetables, on pasta, on stir fries, sandwiches, pizza, I don't know, you name it. Do you all like chili crisp, or has anybody had it before? A few people? Okay, and how do you like to eat it?
Vegetables.
Yeah, on vegetables? Mhm. Yeah, I think the first time I tried it, I had a jar and I ate the whole jar in a week because I put it on everything. I even put it on, this is gonna sound weird, but I put it on peanut butter toast. Because I was just so into it, I just had to have it with every meal. So anyway, you can make it as mild as you want. When we start making it, I'll talk about how what types of peppers to use if you want it to be spicier or more mild, or just, you know, get a different flavor profile. But anyway, I looked at a lot of recipes for chili crisp, and some of them were quite complicated that involved processing dried chilies yourself, which is like, you have to wear gloves and goggles and, you know, make sure the room is well ventilated. Or recipes where you have to fry the onions and garlic before you cook them, but I thought, you know, most of these ingredients come already dried, so why not just throw them together and make it really easy? So that's how we're gonna do that. Okay. Those are all ready to go. And we'll just cover the rest of the peanuts. And we're also gonna use peanuts in the chili crisp to make it a little extra crunchy. So we'll save some of those for later. All right. So let's get started on the chili crisp. Yeah, I'll just make them this pot. Okay. So we're gonna prepare this in a saucepan, and it comes together really quickly, so we kind of just want to have everything ready to go before we start cooking it. So we are gonna start by, this is an optional ingredient and step, but we're gonna start by sort of infusing the oil with Szechuan peppercorns and cinnamon sticks. So if you don't like this flavor, I tend to keep it kind of light flavor in here, but you could infuse it longer if you want. But I think it provides a little extra complexity to the recipe. So Szechuan peppercorns, they're actually, I think, quite different from like black pepper. They're from the prickly ash tree. And they have kind of a fruity fragrance, kind of floral, and they have this tongue tingling numbing effect, which some people like and some people don't like. I think the amount in this recipe, it doesn't really have that effect, but it just kind of gives it a nice flavor. So usually when I use Szechuan peppercorns at home, like in a stir fry or mapo tofu or something, I cook them in the oil and then strain them out, and then that flavor gets infused. So that's one way to do it. You can also grind them up and put the powder in. So you probably get more potent flavor that way, but it just takes a little more because you gotta, I usually grind it with a mortar and pestle and then push it through a strainer like this so that you just get the powdery parts and not the shells. So I like to just infuse the oil. It's a little quicker and easier. So we're gonna make just kind of a small batch. I think the amount on your recipe is about one small jar like this, so about an 8-ounce jar. So you could make a bigger quantity if you want. So we're gonna use a neutral flavored oil like canola oil. Olive oil, you know, extra virgin olive oil has a stronger flavor. And it kind of, hardens in the refrigerator. So that's not my first choice for this, and I ran out of oil, so I'm gonna use a little bit of this vegetable, canola oil. So I kind of want that neutral flavor and the light colored. And we gathered the other things, so we're also going to use chopped onion and garlic. And I have a couple of types of pepper flakes too. Okay, so for the oil, it's important not to burn anything in this dish, well, really ever, but especially here. So we're gonna keep the heat on like low, medium. And we're gonna keep an eye on it and just cook these things pretty carefully. So I'm gonna do 2 teaspoons of the Szechuan peppercorns. I think they're more potent when they're fresh, and these aren't, they're fine, but they're not like, I didn't just buy them yesterday. So if you do want to try it with this, you could try starting with a little less in case it's more potent, but this is what I used in creating this recipe. So they're not super strong, or again, you can just leave this out. So I added 2 teaspoons, and then we're gonna add a cinnamon stick. And between this recipe and the golden milk, we're using a lot of spices. And so I want to talk about buying them in bulk because you can save a lot of money, especially if you're using, say, a lot of turmeric. If you wanted to make, for the golden milk, 1 batch is, I think, a 1/4 cup of turmeric. So if you wanted to make like 5 jars, you would need kind of a lot. So if you bought individual jars like this, it would be pretty expensive, but you can buy it in bulk and save some money. So some stores let you bring your own containers, like Berkeley bowl. You just weigh them before, fill it up and get it weighed after. So I got, I think, 6 cinnamon sticks in here for 32 cents. So like 5 cents a cinnamon stick. Then I went to the spice aisle and they had them already packaged, and it was $8 for one of these. I'm sure it wasn't completely full, but it was, it's like 10 times cheaper. So you can save some money by shopping in bulk. Okay, so we're gonna just kind of slowly heat this up. Sometimes it will sizzle a little bit, so I like to kind of get it to that point, so I make sure I know that it's cooking and infusing the oil. But we can get everything else ready while we're waiting. So we're basically gonna infuse the oil, strain out the peppercorns and the cinnamon stick, and save the oil, and then add it back to the pan, and then you can just discard the Szechuan peppercorns. We can get everything else ready. So I'm using garlic and onion that are already dried, which makes it much easier than like finely mincing everything and cooking it yourself. And now something that's really important, this is an oil-based condiment. And so you have to be careful about botulism. So that can happen. You might have heard about people infusing, like making garlic infused oil. They put fresh garlic in the oil. And basically oil is an anaerobic environment, meaning there's no oxygen. And that's how botulism can thrive. So when you introduce fresh ingredients or things that have water in them, that can lead to botulism and other spoilage. So I wouldn't alter this with anything fresh unless you really know what you're doing. So this just makes it a little easier using things that are already dried. So I also got these chopped onions in bulk. I got a lot more than I needed, but it was $1.84. So again, pretty affordable. Sometimes this minced garlic is hard to find, so this is not garlic powder or granulated garlic. We want something that still has a little texture. So you can see that. Try to hold on all the different camera angles for the live audience. So not all stores have this, but I think I looked it up. And I found it online at Safeway, Target, and maybe another common store. So you just might have to go to a couple stores, but I found it at Grocery Outlet for $1. So that's another good place to look. Okay, so this is slowly heating. So I don't have it all the way heated up, so I don't want to burn it, but it's kind of hard to tell when it's done. It depends on how much flavor you want in there. I think if you really wanted to infuse it, you would keep it on really low heat for half an hour or so, but this is kind of the express version. But you might notice that the peppercorns are starting to darken a little bit, and everything in here might start sizzling a bit, so I like to get it to the point where it's sizzling for a minute or two. You could also, if you like the cinnamon flavor, you could just leave the cinnamon stick in there, and hopefully whoever you give it to knows that you're not supposed to eat the stick. But then it will just continue infusing for as long as they have it in their fridge. Also, this should be stored in the refrigerator just to maximize food safety precautions. So it's starting to sizzle, so we'll give it a couple more minutes there. And we can just go ahead and get everything else ready to throw in. So we're gonna do a tablespoon and a half of the minced onion, and you can also customize this to your taste. Trader Joe's has a chili onion crunch or something that has a lot more onion in it, so if you like that flavor, or especially if you want it to be crunchy without a lot of chili peppers, you could do more onion. But this is the balance that I like personally. And then about a tablespoon of minced garlic. Set that aside, and we can get some more peanuts ready. So we need 2 tablespoons. So I'll also have to use in bulk, using my own jars. It takes a little more time, but I don't know, there's something kind of fun about using your own jars and weighing things, and you can also bring a funnel, that helps. Make sure you don't make a mess. All right, so we're just gonna kind of roughly chop up the peanuts. Again, if somebody has a peanut allergy or just doesn't like them, you could try, some of the chili crisps have soy nuts in them, which you can find at the grocery store. They kind of give it a little crunch, or you could just leave it out. Okay, so I like it pretty fine because everything else in the recipe is pretty finely chopped. So I don't know if can you smell that? Maybe in the front row can start to smell the peppercorns. So maybe by the time it gets to the back, this will be done. But yeah, that's sizzling in there. I can tell the oil is darkening a little bit. And what I find is that when I cook it like this and I strain out the big chunks, there's still like little bits of peppercorn left in there. So you do get a little bit of flavor too without having to grind them all up. Okay, so let's talk about pepper flakes. There are so many kinds of pepper flakes. This is the kind that you probably most likely find at the store, just standard crushed red pepper. But there's no defined mix of the regular like national brands, grocery store brands with crushed red pepper. I think a lot of companies just use their own mix, but they're, I would say, like mildly spicy to moderately spicy. But there's all kinds of other peppers out there. So you can customize and use whatever you'd like based on the flavor, the spice level, and the texture. So I'm gonna do half of these kind of standard pepper flakes just because that's what you are most likely to have at home already. You could do the entire recipe with just these, and that would be totally fine. And it'll be medium spicy or so. But I'm gonna do half these Korean chili flakes. This is called gochugaru, and these are not spicy.
Oh.
So if you want milder, you could use 100% this, or you can do a mix. So I didn't want to be too spicy for here, so I did half and half.
With the second chili flavors, does it just add the flavor without the spice? You just totally separated without the other?
Yeah, yeah, you can do whatever mix you want. They're also seedless, so if you don't want a whole bunch of seeds in there, these are nice because they're already seedless. You can also use Aleppo pepper, which originated in Syria. It's a little bit spicier than this, and I think has kind of a fruity flavor too. Let me see, I wrote some of these down. Okay, let's turn this heat down really quick. I don't know, can you smell the peppercorns back there? Okay. Let's strain that out. So Where did I write my notes? Oh, I think I just put them on your recipes, different types of peppers you can use. Okay, so now we're gonna strain everything out. So I'm just gonna take a bowl, we're gonna put the oil in here. And I'm gonna take a little strainer here. And I find it easiest just to get the cinnamon stick out first. Oops. Oh, maybe not, maybe this is harder. Yeah, okay, it is harder. All right, so we're gonna just pour everything into the strainer. So we just want the oil and not all the peppercorns. Just be very careful, it's gonna be really hot. Hot oil, scary. Okay. So I'm gonna set that aside. And then I'm often left with a few peppercorns in the bottom, so I usually just take a spoon and scoop them out. If you accidentally eat one of these peppercorns, you'll know it because it'll be a very strong sensation in your mouth and it'll go a little numb. Nothing dangerous about it, but some people like that sensation, but if not, you know, make sure you get all the peppercorns out. Okay, so that infused oil goes back in. And I don't know if you can tell, but can't really see the color of the oil, but it was very pale and now it's a bit darker. So that might be hard to see, but it's darkened a bit. And now we're gonna put the heat on low and we're gonna fry the dried onion and garlic for a couple minutes, which will help get out any remaining moisture and just crisp it up a little bit and brown it too. So this can happen really fast. Again, make sure you watch it, keep the temperature low. And what you can also do is keep your onion nearby and kind of hold it next to it for reference. So I can see that's already darkened a bit. These are kind of on the dark end of the spectrum for dried onions, so I wouldn't want to get them just golden because they're already golden and they're not even cooked. So set that aside. And now we'll add everything else. So 2 tablespoons of peanuts, chopped peanuts. And I'm gonna throw those in early, make sure if there's any moisture left there that it kind of gets cooked out. And then we'll do the peppers. So the recipe calls for, I think, a 1/4 cup. So half of a 1/4 cup is 2 tablespoons. So we'll just add 2 tablespoons of each. And if you want to get really fancy and use different kinds of peppers that come already crushed, you could do that. Or you can take like whole dried peppers and process them yourself, which is a little bit more work. I think I mentioned that in the beginning, but if you want to really customize the flavor profile, then you could do that too. Okay, so stir that up. Everything's sizzling a bit, but well, this was on low, but it still got pretty hot, so just be careful. And that's gonna get the oil nice and infused. I don't know if you can tell, but that oil is already like bright red from all the peppers. And then we're also gonna add some salt. Since it's a condiment, I add a whole teaspoon, but if you want it to be salt-free or less salty, you can feel free to do it to taste, but add less salt. So that's pretty much it. You have it there and you can just put it in a jar and you can keep some for yourself or give it as a gift, whatever you'd like. So just set that aside. And yeah, that's kind of how it looks when it's all done. And you can see the oil layer on top. It's very, very red from the chili. So yeah, you can also make chili oil, which has chili flavor, but without the crunchy parts. But personally, I love this stuff. So I think this is the way to go. And the last thing we're gonna do is a golden milk mix. So all we're gonna do for this is mix up a bunch of spices. So the idea is that you can give it in a jar with the instructions, and similar to the last recipe, you can kind of customize this to your taste. So I'm gonna grab a few different spices here. I used all the optional ones just so you could see how that tastes, but you don't have to, you can keep it simpler. Please. Okay, so golden milk has become pretty trendy in the last few years, but it originated in India and is part of, Ayurvedic medicine, which is a natural form of medicine that's been practiced in India for over 3,000 years. And originally it was a simpler recipe, usually just milk and turmeric. But a lot of people like it with some extra spices to kind of add complexity to it and cover up a little bit of that earthy flavor that you get from the turmeric. And it just makes it like nice and warming and cozy and great for winter and a dreary day like today. So this recipe is from Minimalist Baker, and one batch makes about 15 servings. So it'll probably fill out like a jar like this big. So you can of course do more if you'd like. So it calls for 4 tablespoons of turmeric, which is the same as a 1/4 cup. Again, this is something I bought in bulk. And I filled up this jar and it cost $1. So if you're making this recipe in particular, highly recommend buying in bulk. Oops. I'm roughly estimating, but it's, yeah, that's about 4 tablespoons or a 1/4 cup. Oops. So if it's something that you want to drink every day, you could maybe double it because 15 servings is like 2 weeks worth or so. Okay. Then we're gonna add 2 teaspoons of ginger. You can add more if you'd like. If you really like ginger, you can add more to taste. Teaspoons of ground ginger. And then 2 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. These are kind of like the key flavors, plus black pepper. So black pepper actually helps your body absorb the turmeric. So turmeric has been thought of as kind of an anti-inflammatory and having all kinds of good healing properties, but we don't really absorb it that well. So, some of the studies that they've done on supplements, they're taking like very large amounts of turmeric. It would be hard to get that much through food. But if you pair it with black pepper, then it helps you absorb the turmeric. And turmeric, as you can see, is a bright yellow-orange spice that it actually kind of looks like ginger when it's fresh. It's a root. And when you cut it open, it's like this bright yellowy orange color inside. So this is obviously the dried version of it. And it's been used in India for nearly 4,000 years, but has become popular all over the world. You've probably seen it in a lot of recipes and things like that. Another reason why I like this recipe is that a lot of these spices you might have in your cabinet, like, nutmeg, I'm gonna use in a bit, the cinnamon, but sometimes it's hard to use up an entire jar of a spice before it starts to lose its potency and flavor after like 6 months or a year. So I like how this recipe, you just get to dump a lot of it in there and kind of use that stuff up. Okay, so next we're gonna do the black pepper. We're gonna do 1 teaspoon. So this does make it kind of spicy. So if you don't want it to be so warm and spicy, do a little less black pepper. Or if you really like it, you can do more. All right, so let's just stir that up. And then we're gonna add the optional spices because why not? Oops, where'd the recipe go? Okay, so optional are nutmeg. I don't know any recipes that call for a lot of nutmeg. It's always like a pinch or an 1/8 of a teaspoon. So this stuff, I'm happy to throw some more in there and make a teeny tiny dent in this big jar of nutmeg. Some ground cardamom. That's a pretty strong flavor, so I wouldn't go overboard with that one. I'm just kind of adding a pinch or so. And some ground cloves, which also is a pretty strong flavor, so just a little pinch or so. And then that's it. So all you have to do is stir it up and get it into a jar. So I'm not gonna demonstrate how to prepare it, because basically, all you do, if you can make it hot or cold. So if you want it warm, some recipes recommend, making sort of a paste in the pan before you add the milk, to make sure everything gets dissolved, but I haven't really found that to be necessary. But if you want to do it that way, you would put, a teaspoon or maybe a heaping teaspoon of the mix into the pot, a little bit of water and your sweetener, and you can make a paste like that first, and then you add the milk of your choice. So I personally like oat milk, that's what I use today. But you can use, cow's milk or almond milk or soy milk or whatever your preference is. You can also add however much sweetener you like, to taste. So I use maple syrup, I think I did about 2 teaspoons per cup, so the amount you have is probably less than a cup. So if that was a little sweet for you, then you could maybe go on the lower end of the spectrum, but of course you can just always make it to taste. I also like to add a little bit of coconut oil for that richness, and fat can also help you absorb turmeric. If you want to make it iced, I think that's the time when it would be important to do the paste first. So you can make it iced as well. And let me see, I always have a lot of things I want to share. Yeah, you may have seen turmeric lattes at coffee shops for like $5-6, but I think with the amount of spices I bought was more than I needed. It probably cost me $4 total, but that's with a lot of spices left over. So if you're counting just the amount of spices that you used in one batch, it's probably less than $1 to make, 1 jar's worth. And I've seen it at stores for $12 for a small jar, so you can make it yourself and customize it. And it's just a thoughtful homemade gift. And you can also make golden milk flavored things like smoothies or macarons or ice cream, so you can get creative with this flavor profile. Really quick, just a couple more things about turmeric. It's been used for centuries or even thousands of years. For the flavor, the color, it's a very bright color, so it's been used to dye clothes and fabric, to preserve things, and for medicinal purposes. The phytochemicals called curcuminoids are the ones that have been most studied for health benefits. So one of those components is curcumin, and a couple of others are in the curcuminoid family. And more studies are needed, but it seems to play a role in inhibiting large increases in cortisol production. That's your stress hormone. And the black pepper again helps absorb it, and may have positive effects on cancer, Alzheimer's, arthritis, and depression. But again, it's not that well absorbed by the body, so I think we're going to need more studies. But by pairing it with things that help it get absorbed, then that's probably better. So anyway, I think that's all of the recipes, and we're just going to finish with the raffle for all the entertainment prizes.